Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the ICG's Digital Academy webinar series. I'm Sally Alsop, the ICG committee member responsible for our webinar programme. So for today's webinar, we're delighted to welcome the 5 finalists for the MRS Award for Independent Consultants 2023. Each of our finalists will share a brief summary of their submissions. And to ensure they have time to speak, we plan to take questions at the end. So if you'd like to ask them something, please type your questions in the chat box as we go through. Or at the end, turn on your webcam, raise your hand, and you can ask your questions yourself. So for today's webinar, we're grateful to Yonder Data Solutions, a trusted fieldwork and data collection company offering numerous services such as UK international online data collection, advanced analytics, CATI, dashboards and visualization, AI technology and omnibus surveys. So thank you to Yonder Data Solutions for sponsoring this webinar. And then now I'm going to hand over to Matt Kirby, who is our ICG member responsible for the award. And he's going to tell you a little bit about the award in general before introducing each of our finalists. So now over to you, Matt.
Okay, thank you, Sally. For anyone who doesn't know, the MRS ICG Award for Independent Consultants has been running since 2016. So 2023 was our 8th year. The idea of an award to recognise and celebrate the contribution of independent consultants was originally championed by Arthur Fletcher. So thank you, Arthur. There are 4 judges each year. 2 are nominated by the MRS and 2 by the ICG, who are all experienced researchers. So a big thank you to my fellow judges this year, Chloe Fowler, Philly Desai and Susie Mullen. The number of entries has grown over the years. This year we had 18 entries and the standard was extremely high. So being shortlisted was a fantastic achievement in itself. And as we're about to hear, the finalists really demonstrate the kind of great work being done by independents. I feel that particularly this year, it's another demonstration of the success of our award, the ICG award, and the contribution of indies generally, is a number of ICG members who are now succeeding in other MRS awards. And this year, ICG members will find this in 6 of different awards on the MRS Awards night, and 4 of them were won by ICG members. So as well as the ICG award, there are a lot of success at the MRS Awards night. If you're inspired to enter, after watching today's finalists, if you're inspired to enter this year, the submission window is from the 2nd of May to the 27th of June, so there's plenty of time to plan, and we'll be sending out more details nearer the time. But if you have any questions about entering, then let me know. I'm always happy to chat at any stage of your kind of thought process. But I think that's enough of me. So let's hear from the first of our excellent 2023 finalists. That's Steph Holland of Hush. So Steph, over to you.
Hello, I'm going to go super fast, and I think the slides will be in the webinar recorded after if anybody wants any of the detail. But if you just go to the first slide, I'll just explain why I entered in the first place. If you move on to the next slide. So I think the point of me of putting this particular study into this award was, for me, it was a real collaborative effort. It's about a mixed methodology study, and all of the people that were used in this were actually either one-man bands or 2 or 3 partner people. So it's actually a very small study. Sorry, a very mixed study of independence. Now, I don't often get asked for mixed methodology studies, as I'm sure a lot of us don't necessarily get asked, because I think people are quite worried about them. They think they're going to be expensive or costly, or that actually independents can't do them. And hopefully I'd like to show through this study that actually that's totally the opposite. They can be very robust, even if you're using just qual methodologies, very adaptable, very efficient, and for this award, particularly collaborative with the use of independence. So if you could go to the next slide, I'll just give you one headline really about what the study was about. So this is a study in the baby sleep category. For those of you that are parents, sleep is a massive issue for new parents. It impacts mental health, pretty much the point where almost all new parents will buy something to help with baby sleep. And my client here is the Mayborn Group, and they had some products. This is one of them. Little Ollie the owl is actually one of Friends. And it was a bit of a conundrum because Ollie was really cute and he got really good reviews. He won lots of awards, but he wasn't selling that well. So the brief was simple. What do we do? How do we fix Ollie? So if you go on to the next page, when I got given the brief, they actually just asked me to basically run consumer interviews to get an experiential map, and the budget was quite tight, and that was that. But actually the problem with that was it was pretty clear we wouldn't get all the answers we need, because actually the reviews are really good. Most likely feedback would be pretty positive, and it probably needed a lot more energy, confidence, answers, triangulation for the business to actually make a change of the scale that would be required. So actually I put forward a mixed methodology study. If you could click, there were 3 parts to this. If you click the first build, the first part was actually doing exactly as they asked. You can do the whole slide. There's two more builds if you want to put it through. That's it, one more build, that's it. So the first part, let's call it building the hypothesis. This was stakeholder and consumer interviews, which was what they asked for. I could have stopped there, but actually it would have been incomplete. So on the back of that, I actually also did a piece of work with Samantha. If you don't know it, it's a really nice piece of psychology AI, and it's really good at decoding not just what people are saying, but actually how they're saying it. And it's brilliant at pulling apart brand and brand connection. So in terms of building the hypothesis, we had this first stage. I then did a little survey with Mums Views, who are a 2-man band who have the largest panel of mums in the UK and the US. And this deliberately wasn't a quantitative piece at the end. It was qualitative to move it forward, to focus, to prioritize. And I then only after that did some in-home ethnography to ask, I guess, parents more of what they think, to test that hypothesis, but predominantly to see in the home how it's being used. Obviously, babies can't speak for themselves, so there's a lot of observation. And in terms of the budget, the digital side was great, and I used Qualsy there, which was fabulous. And then the final part, before coming to conclusions, was a semiotic review. And this was super, super important because, as I said before, the answers wouldn't all come from parents, and there were lots of questions around this, around the role of character, and should it be an owl or should it be another type of animal, and none of those parents would answer. If I'd asked parents, and I did ask parents, literally the importance was so low, you'd almost ignore it. Whereas when you look semiotically at the category, at the products, at the character, then you've got some really clear answers on what to do. So it was a real mixed methodology study resulting in a strategic action plan. And if you go on to the next slide, the only point I really wanted to make around each stage, if you can flick to the next slide. Oh, yeah, sorry, it's just coming up. The only point I wanted to make about, yeah, it's not quite building there, perfect, is when we think about mixed methodology studies, you sort of go, well, was it needed? Is it essential? Sorry, if you can go back one. Is it needed, essential? And the point was every part of the methodology added something unique. So without going into detail, because this will be on the webinar recording, things like the psychology AI, it was really clear in that stage that the emotional connection was lacking, and we had the metrics to prove to the business that was such. In the survey, we saw an overstatement of awareness, which we wouldn't have seen just by speaking to parents. In the semiotic review, we got a really clear understanding of character. So every stage was really important to basically building on the last, testing it out, bringing the client along and getting to the end point, and basically giving confidence to make a big change. And then if you go to the last slide, just to give you a feel, whilst the product wasn't the only thing that changed, and actually the product was the last recommendation to change, it's quite a nice way of visualizing the impact of the product or the project. And you can see that actually the old Ollie moved to the new Ollie this year. It's actually in transition at the minute in a soft launch. But it was all around leveraging those semiotic cues, much more in sleep, much more human-like, being smaller and soft and fluffier for the needs of baby, as we'd seen through the ethnography. that they needed, and actually being better for parents, still containing the things that they loved about it, which had given it the ratings in the first place, but making it machine washable and some other stuff that had to go through. So a whistle-stop tour of the whole project, really. If you need anything or you have any questions, please just drop me a line. Yeah, and that's it.
Brilliant. Thanks, Steph. That was very efficient. So thanks for that. And over to our next finalist, who's Debbie Moorcroft. Debbie, over to you.
Thank you very much, Matt. We're moving on from sleepy babies into a project I worked on a couple of years ago, and it was a two-stage project, not quite as multi-methodology as the one we've just seen, but it was a sort of fairly traditional piece of qual and quant. I was working for a charity called HFT, who I must admit I'd not come across before, but they are a really fantastic organisation. It was a really exciting job, and one of those that's stuck in the mind, and I think that's the reason why I entered, because it was one of those projects that I know I'll always remember. The people I met traveling around the country, going to the different venues, etc. It really stuck with me, and that was why I thought, oh, maybe there's something in this. I'll write up a submission, and just talking about why we've entered, that was really the main reason I did it. But I didn't expect to get shortlisted, and it took me a long time to get around to entering. So if you're mulling over this year whether to give it a go or not, actually writing the submission didn't really take very long, and I felt like I got a lot out of it. So I highly recommend it, and I know Matt would support you as he did with all of us. So on to my first actual slide. This is the screen grab just from their website, HFT. What they do is provide services for adults with learning disabilities. So when they've transitioned out from sort of children's social care into adult social care, people need supported living, they might need day activities to do, they need help with personalised technology, and they need a lot of them, there's a huge need for sort of friendship and connection with others. And this charity actually has almost like a dating app called Love to Meet You, which provides a safe space to connect and go out in small groups with other adults with learning disabilities. So they do a lot of really interesting stuff. It's not just daycare or something like that. But what they wanted to find out is, what do people want for the future? So what are they doing well now? Quite a lot. But adults who have service use and young adults coming through into the system, they sort of want to know what's changing. And they were also thinking about a rebrand, which was sadly has sort of hit the buffers due to internal politics within the charity, but that was where they're at. They've got the information ready to do that in the future, but the brand is still as it was. But what they have done is move on with some of the communications, particularly you see on this screen grab from the website the phrase "your best life possible." The young woman in that picture, she was actually one of my participants in one of the groups, but that phrase "your best life possible" was something that's come out of the qual. So I just wanted to just share that with you. So on to the next slide. I know you're all researchers, so I thought you might want to know what we actually did. Essentially, it was a lot of mini groups with people who use the services, with young adults who are using other services at the moment. We went to National Star Academy, which is where Katie Price's son Harvey was a student, and other venues like that. We also did some work with families of people who use HFT services to get the sort of perspective of the parent or input from people who weren't able to contribute in other ways. And we talked to some potential supporters. I've just put in a couple of images from the groups to give you a sort of little snapshot of what it was like. So moving on. This was one of the key outputs from the research, and it is nothing groundbreaking. I'm sure you've all done similar things to this yourselves, but it was essentially one of the phrases we were testing was this thing about best life possible. And it was something the client had started using in some communications, but wasn't really using very much. And it turned out to be a really surprisingly resonant phrase for this audience, regardless of their level of disability or their level of care needs. Actually, this phrase, they were worried about using it because it's like living your best life can be seen as, oh, I'm having a wonderful time sitting in the Maldives having a cocktail, can't it? But that isn't what it means to people with learning disability. For them, it was about being as independent as they can be, maybe, achieving something that to us might be every day, like going on a bus by themselves, etc. So it was a really important phrase, and it came out stunningly in every group how well this worked. So I just put together this poster from all the posters that they created in the groups. I just want to zoom in on a little close-up for you, just to give you an idea of the sorts of things that were coming into the poster. On to the next slide, please. So hopefully you can see this, but some of this is things that they've written themselves, or they've written with some support, or they've drawn. I want to have a pet cobra. I want a rabbit. I want to go to a bus museum or flamingo land. I want more friends. The need for social contact was really important. This community was still very affected, even though it was after COVID. Their activities hadn't restarted. I think the combination of COVID and nervousness around people with health conditions, etc., and budget cuts and things meant that people's services just weren't restarting. So there was lots of need around for getting back out, going to things that they had done before. And they were still talking as if we were living in lockdown, despite the fact I was doing the fieldwork, traveling around the country, being perfectly free and back to normal life. For this audience, that COVID had a much longer overshadow. So I love this poster, just the zoom up, just to show you the sort of input that they were making. They loved, we made posters in every group, even in groups where we had people who couldn't speak, which we did in some of the groups, where they were able to contribute something, we stuck it up and we worked with it. So moving on to the next slide. I can't possibly tell you everything we found, but I sort of grouped together this best life possible phrase into all the things that came out that they wanted. And for the adults with learning disabilities and the young adults, it was about working. That wasn't necessarily paid employment, but it could be. Voluntary work was also important. Getting back to doing hobbies, many of which hadn't restarted. Holidaying and taking breaks. Being independent, etc. It was all the things you'd expect in a life, apart from so financially influenced. It wasn't about money, it wasn't about success. So hopefully that just gives you a small insight into one of the facets of the project. I'm going to skip on because Matt's just reminded me I'm talking too much. I've put in a slide which you can use, and please come back to me if you're ever asked to do work with this audience. I have done other work with adults with learning disabilities and other disabilities. If you need any ideas and suggestions, I'd be very happy for you to approach me individually. But it was nothing groundbreaking. I honestly, I didn't do anything special. But there is a thing called Easy Read, which is what these images here show, and we use that extensively in the qual and in the quant. So the quant stage, don't worry, I've got very little to say on the quant stage because it was mostly about the rebranding. So if you could just skip on to the next slide. It was an online survey, and I worked with the fantastic Nick Harter at YOLO, who's an ICG member. We did an internal and an external survey, and we were essentially testing branding elements for them. And as they haven't gone on to do the rebrand as yet, I won't share you too much about that. So moving on to the quant stage, second slide. There's also some tips there about questionnaire design. If you are working with this audience again and you want to run anything by me, please do. But this screen grab here actually that's the intro slide on the so it shows you what Easy Read looks like. It's short bullet point text and images which help readers with disabilities, or indeed people who struggle with reading, because of educational needs. It really helped, and we kept everything really simple, like age 10 reading age, and used very short emoji scales. I don't think I've ever really used a 3-point scale before, but we did here because it just seemed, I really like it, I like it, I don't like it. There's no need to fluff anything else out. So final slide. Thank you, Matt. That's the outcomes which I submitted to the award, which they obviously liked. I was just sort of just summarizing that. That's a direct lift. So if you're writing your own submission, that's what went in on mine. And the final slide, if I have 30 seconds just to show you, this is Love to Meet You, the dating and friendship app. If you can go to 3 minutes, 12 seconds, Matt, I'd be much obliged. This is just showing you these aren't people who took part in the research necessarily, although some of them are. Let's just hear from them. Thank you. Oh, do we have sound on it, Matt? Oh, that's such a shame. Hopefully the link will be in the in the deck when it comes out, or when in the presentation when it's shared, you might be able to hear the sound, but it's just showing you how important that service is. And that was one of the things that came through from our Best Life Possible poster, the need for the human connection to get back into friendships, to doing activities which they had so much lost, and how much they got out of this service. So the charity is now much more able to present that service, knowing that for their current users and for the younger audience coming through, that's an absolutely vital part of their offering. Whereas I think before it was very much seen as a niche sort of add-on to the daycare and the other things that they do. But Love to Meet You is an absolutely brilliant concept, and yeah, I wish them every success with it. Thank you, guys.
Okay, thank you, Debbie. And that video, because there won't be a deck going out, but people get in
Oh,
touch
yeah.
with you, or will it? Is it?
Of course.
Find it on YouTube?
Absolutely. It will. I found it on YouTube, and yeah, if anybody needs anything, please, about this audience, please just get in touch anytime. Always happy to chat it through.
Great, thanks, Debbie. Moving on to the next finalist is Kath Coles of White Rabbit. Over to you, Kath.
Hi. Okay, so this was a really interesting project, and I think, like, I can't remember, was it Debbie said it's one that will sort of stick in my mind again, a lot to do with the people that we were speaking to, as well as having the pleasure of working with Nick and Annabelle. It's the first time I've ever entered anything like this, which is a bit embarrassing given how long I've been in qualitative research, and I think I probably wouldn't have done it if it hadn't been in collaboration with Nick and Annabelle. So again, it's kind of, it was, for me, the ICG was the sort of perfect award to kind of start with, I suppose, because I kind of felt like I had that support and encouragement of Nick and Annabelle as well. And as Debbie said as well, got loads out of it. It's been a really great experience, and had a fantastic night at the MRF Awards. Getting Matt on the dance floor was a highlight. So I think just for that, I would definitely say it's worth entering. So just to talk you through a little bit about the project. So it's probably useful just to kind of give you a little bit of insight into who the Children's Coaching Collaborative are. So if we nip on to the next slide, Sally. So basically, they're a collaboration of stakeholders who've got a kind of really strong interest in the coaching of children and young people. And what they're all about is this idea of child-first coaching. So it's not about how many games you win. It's not about how great you are at dribbling. It's about participation. So their kind of aim is to really encourage as many children as possible to participate in sport and activity, and to hopefully give them that kind of lifelong enthusiasm, which will kind of lead to healthier children becoming adults. So what they wanted to do was to kind of create a campaign that would really help to motivate coaches and to get them to support this idea from the grassroots up. Obviously, there's lots of coaches out there who are already pursuing this kind of approach, but there are also a lot of coaches who aren't, not necessarily because they don't want to, because they don't know anything about it. So that's what this campaign was aiming to do. So if we could pop on to the next slide. There were some kind of challenges around this, and I think that the main one was the client was really very keen to make sure that this campaign did not just talk to the kind of white middle class coaches coaching the white middle class children. You know, it had to be diverse, so it had to kind of get out there and really talk to these more sort of niche audiences as well. So coaches who were working in kind of deprived areas, coaches who were working with disabled children, or children with learning difficulties, or girls participating in traditionally male sports as well. And it was really important as well that the campaign hit the right note in terms of tone of voice. As you can imagine, you know, what we were trying to do was to encourage coaches to potentially work in a different way, but we had to be really careful that that didn't mean that we were kind of criticising how they were doing things already. So those are the kind of key challenges. And I think obviously because we were trying to talk to this big range of coaches, you know, that meant that the scale of the project was pretty big, but it also meant that we had to be quite creative in our recruitment processes as well. So moving on to the next slide, you know, it became really important to me when I got this brief. So actually, interestingly, the brief came from an ICG member, so thank you very much, Barbara. So Barbara came to me. We've worked together for many years, going right back to the 90s. I think it might have been when Barbara was at Sky, without giving our ages away too much. But when Barbara came to me, I was really keen to work on the project, but looking at the size of it, I was like, God, I'm not quite sure I can manage this. And so what I did was went to Nick, went to Annabelle, who I work with regularly, and we kind of brought together our sort of different experiences. Annabelle's worked with organisations like this before, so she had that sector expertise. Nick's got great brand development experience and also obviously worked on the client side for a long time. And my kind of background is quite heavily sort of focused on advertising development, so it felt like all our skills came together to create a really nice team. And because we're independent, you know, we're not kind of constricted by those sort of big bureaucracies that you get in big agencies, so we felt like we had that real agility that was going to really help with this project, where we kind of needed to think on our feet on some occasions. So moving on to the next slide. So what did we do? It was a two-stage project, as the other guys have talked about. You know, multi-method was really important. You know, we used the kind of the standard online groups to get to those mainstream audiences, but they just weren't going to work when we were trying to talk to coaches of those more niche audiences. So we actually went out there, spent kind of half a day with them, talked to the coaches, talked to the kids, also used lots of video to really sort of get that richness of insight. And we shot some of it. We got professional people to shoot it, but we also got the coaches to shoot stuff as well. So it really felt authentic and very powerful. And then in the second stage, we conducted some more groups. What we did at this point was to kind of use some of the coaches from the first stage who were sort of aware of the process, that we kind of brought them on the journey with us. But we also brought in some fresh voices as well, to make sure that we were kind of on the right page. And even in the second stage, you know, this whole idea of sort of diversity was really at the sort of heart of what we were doing. So we made sure, you know, that really came through in recruitment. Next slide. So in terms of the impact, it was fantastic. So Play Their Way was the route that was chosen, and we helped them to kind of develop a script and refine that in the second stage of research. And that video actually went out, I think it was May last year. And I checked the other day, and it's actually had more than 2.5 million views. So really successful from that point of view. But also the feedback that the client was getting is that it's really been successful in talking to this diverse range of coaches. So we've kind of hit that brief. And also the portal that they've created with the sort of resources that back up the campaign is doing really well to sort of talk to different coaches. So those coaches who are kind of along all the different stages of the journey in terms of getting to this sort of child first ideal. So that was really great as well. It was reflecting all those different perspectives and all the different types of coaches that we came across during the research. Next slide, sorry. So what did we learn? So it sounds a bit play school. What did we learn? We learned lots of things, but there were three sort of big things that we learned. And the first was, you know, kind of embrace the old, think about new ideas, and kind of, you know, just get all that knowledge, all that experience, and work with it. So we were really lucky. We had a kind of decent sized budget, so we could do them sort of mix and match methodology. So the face-to-face stuff was really great for getting that kind of in-depth insight and reaching those less mainstream audiences. But you know, those online groups were fantastic as well, because they allowed us to really sort of broaden our reach and you know, quite literally cast the net wide. There's no such thing as impossible recruitment, although it certainly felt like it at times. We were really proud of the kind of diversity of coaches that we got. You know, I had a ballet teacher who was teaching Syrian refugees. You know, we spoke to so many different types of coaches, and we just wouldn't have got those people if we'd just gone out with the sort of traditional approaches. So using all our contacts, using social media, as well as sort of traditional recruiters, really helped us there. And the third thing, you know, the ICG's just got such a brilliant wealth of resource. So, you know, at first glance, as I say, when I looked at this project, it looked pretty daunting and I wasn't sure I was going to be able to manage it. But, you know, getting Nick and Annabelle on board meant that it was great. And, you know, we were really able to sort of make the most of all our skills. And then last slide. I think finally, just wanted to really sort of shout out to the coaches, really. I think, you know, the most memorable part of the project was talking to them and just understanding what a great group of people they are, particularly those who are, you know, coaching children and young people who've got some, you know, fairly big challenges ahead of them. And so, yeah, I think we just felt very grateful to have been able to work on a project that was pretty humbling, but also very inspiring. And that's me.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kath. So that's 3 brilliant presentations so far. Our fourth one up is Adam Pearson and Emma Slater from PS Research, who not only were a finalist, but they were also highly commended for their submissions. So Adam and Emma.
Yep. Hi everyone. I'm Adam. Just by way of context, we came together a couple of years ago as two independents that joined forces as a formal partnership, and I guess we put this submission together because we felt it was the first project that really kind of epitomised why we made that decision and really brought that home. So I'll just talk you through a little bit about that now. Go to the next slide. So this project was working in Cumbria. So sometimes when you think of Cumbria, you think of those really nice villages and great walks around the Lake District, but there's also some really high levels of poverty and deprivation in pockets of the area. And there are various different employment programs going on across the country, funded. This one was slightly different in that they described it as a participant-led employment project. So that was putting the kind of power back into people and not just trying to get them straight back into work, but understanding what they wanted and trying to support them, whether it was around their mental health skills, whatever it might have been. It was also a partnership project, so it was led by the Community and Voluntary Service, but various different charities and sector partners involved. It was also European funded back when Europe gave us money and spoke to us. So that was a consideration that we had to factor in all that entailed as we go through. And the ask for us was to come in pretty much at the end, the last few months, and do kind of a mixed methods evaluation. But it was quite a basic level ask. I'm getting quite a bit of feedback from someone here, by the way. But, anyway,
Charles Durow, could you mute yourself, please?
That's better, thank you. Yeah, anyway, next slide, please. I'll try and talk over it. So I guess we're probably as well going to talk through a lot about the project and challenges rather than the methods. I think, being honest, we didn't put this in because we felt they were really great, innovative research methods. It was all relatively standard stuff. It was all the stuff that went around the edges. So what we did was try and start by unpicking what is quite a complex project. There were a lot of people involved, a lot of different views. So started that off with a stakeholder session to try and understand those, try and get that buy-in, really understand what's going on around the project, but also from a practical point of view, test some of the methods that they were suggesting that we should do. So, for example, wanting to run surveys with disengaged, people who are economically inactive that they can't even reach themselves isn't realistic. So starting to understand what might be possible with what they did. What was also really clear was that they were sat on a lot of data. So the good news for it being European funded is they had to provide a lot of data. The bad news was there was a lot of data, everywhere that had to be pulled together. And I think from their perspective, they just thought they were providing numbers there. They didn't see the potential value from that. So we were able to come in and start to analyze it. So from simple things like turning their postcode into deprivation categories, so that they could start to really tell a story about the people that they were supporting, because they were also collecting really useful things like whether their household was workless, whether they'd been homeless or things like that, but they only knew it on an individual level to try and bring that data together and tell some of that stories. There was also challenges around like they knew they had a lot of disengagement through the project, but they'd not thought to record that data, so they kind of knew it anecdotally, but we could never quite turn that back in. So that was some learning from them about how, if you can bring partners in earlier, they could learn from that. I'll pass you on to Emma now. We can talk about some of the qual.
Yeah, so we also did some, oh, no, if you could go back, sorry, I'm just going to finish that slide. So we also did some primary research as part of the evaluation, which in itself was quite challenging. We conducted research amongst the project participants themselves, the project partners, so that was support workers and managers, and also internal staff members amongst the Cumbria CVS, for example. So the research amongst the participants was quite tricky. They were quite vulnerable people. A lot of them were suffering from quite significant mental health issues. They had very poor self-confidence, and they weren't very receptive at the beginning to taking part in the research. So one of the ways to overcome that challenge was to adapt the observational part of the observation research I was going to do. So I'd already planned to do some observational research by attending the activities. So I went to cooking on a budget, a photography workshop, so kind of activities that they were running. But instead of just observing, which I felt would, further distance the people from the research, I used that time to build rapport. So talking to the participants, making them sure they felt comfortable, that they might kind of like me and want to talk to me afterwards, which it worked really well actually in helping them feel confident to be interviewed afterwards. It was really tricky doing the research amongst the internal project team and the project partners. There was some really complex kind of internal politics going on. I'm not sure how we managed to do that. We just tried our best to navigate that and try to gain trust from all the different kind of partners. We also had a challenge in telling the story, mainly because we wanted to tell it in the way we felt would be most useful, which wasn't the kind of conventional summative evaluation report, word report that was the original ask. We had some challenges in terms of showing the impact of such a project with the kind of hard to measure outcomes and unconventional measures. Because a lot of it was about improving self-confidence and improving self-esteem. And the project team did have their own tool to collect data on this, but we just kind of used a lot of case studies as well to illustrate the individual impact or the impact on individuals and what it really meant. And so we also wanted to tell the story in the most useful way and steer away from this kind of dry word report. So we ended up creating several separate reports, so a short summary report, a more detailed report, and also an internal learning report, which wasn't part of the original ask. But we just learned so much from talking to the project partners that we felt that they could use to improve things going forward internally, that we created a separate report for them as well. So next page, please. And so it had a lot of challenges, it really did, but it was worth it in the end, not least because we managed to go to the MRS Awards in London. And originally when we were wondering whether to put a submission in and we really weren't sure whether it was the right kind of project, we went back to the client and asked them for a reference, but also just to tell us a little bit about if they're using the evaluation reports or how they were using it. And that was when we really decided we could put a submission in, because they have been using them in a lot of different ways and we feel like they have really been having impact. So they use them to bid for additional funding. They've made changes to their data collection practices internally. They've got various different local stakeholders more involved with them. So we really felt, it was worth it. Back to Adam. Adam, you're on mute, are you not there? You disappeared.
Yeah, I've just done the classic thing and talked for a minute on mute. 3 reasons we put this forward. As I said, it wasn't about the methods. I guess and hopefully all these kind of count for any independence really, but we felt it was the value of bringing two specialists together. It's not just bring those skills together, but it's also the perspectives and challenging each other. So often Emma saying, why haven't you analysed that bit of data, or could you do this or something like that? But always really useful for me. I guess that flexibility and willingness to do what was right. So if we'd have just followed what we were asked to do, it would look like a very different project, but we wanted to make it the best it could be. And I think that's what we all try and do. And then I think the final one is, because it's our own business really, I think we're more willing to go rogue a little bit, and we won't play it safe, and we'll stand up for what we think is the right way to do it. And we were lucky to have a really open client who could see that, and I think they saw the value in the end. So yeah, that's why we'll put it forward.
Great, thanks Adam and Emma. So moving on to Sally Kemkers, of Untapped Innovation, who was the winner of the award. Sally, over to you.
Great, thank you very much. Can everybody see the screen? See the slides?
Yes, I can see it.
Excellent. All right, so this was a submission working together with Book Trust, helping to reach disadvantaged children. So just a brief introduction. I'm one of 3 partners at Untapped. We're all scientists by background, but we've been trained in consumer understanding, and we've also worked client side, both in R&D and then also marketing and insight. So a lot of our clients are R&D. In this case, Book Trust went across all of the functions. And I'm a very grateful member of the ICG. So I've only been with the ICG for 18 months, but it's incredible already how much of an impact that's had. So we operate by working with over 100 associates. And what we do is for every project that we have, we look and see where specialists are needed. And the ICG has been such a rich source of those. And we'll see that as we go through. So the approach that we take is we talk about unearthing 3 types of insight. Human insight, so that's the consumer insight, often through deep qual research, but a variety of methodologies. Future insight, and then technology insight. So scientists, we're very keen to understand what's going on under the bonnet. And by connecting all of those things, we get to breakthrough products. So in this case, Book Trust, they're the UK's largest children's reading charity. And they have a 5-year strategy of trying to target families, particularly early years, but families from low income or vulnerable backgrounds. And they brought us in and said, could you help to think about a user journey over the whole day and understand what are these target families, what are they doing, where are their pain points, review currently the offerings and services that Book Trust offer to this particular target, validate these or suggest enhancements, and for suggesting those enhancements, go in and co-create with some of this target some new offerings to try and drive these lifelong reading habits amongst this particular target. And in doing so, also inspire their internal and external stakeholders. So how do we go about doing this? Well, we started with some asset mining, where we worked closely with the Book Trust to understand what are they doing today, because obviously trying to invent new stuff for the future, you don't want to reinvent any wheels. And then we had an inside-outside world approach. So our inside world approach was some deep qualitative research. We were doing ethnographic online work using Qualzy with Qual diary uploads, video uploads. We were trying to understand how this target, throughout their day, their existing routines and rituals where they're sort of interacting and using story or connections with their children. So going beyond actually reading books, many of this target weren't doing that much reading, but thinking about their existing rituals and how you could increase the frequency of connections there. And as a result, we had an outcome of 3 things. I'll briefly show you them in a minute. So we had a user journey map, we had a product model of what every new idea must do, and then a sort of destinations map to inspire new ideas. The outside world future forecasting, we did some semiotics and we did some social listening, because we always find that if you don't future-proof what you do, what you talk to the consumer about, then you're going to get a reflection of more of today. And then a co-creation, so working through designing future ideas with the team in a collaborative workshop, and then going back to consumers and reviewing those ideas. So the independents that were so valuable to us, Zoe McQuillan, who a member of the ICG, a qual researcher, a real expert in these underrepresented audiences. So she helped us with that. There's very sensitive discussions we needed to have with the audience. Future forecasting, David Panos, an amazing semiotician, Rosie Blake, social listening, and then Nick Sharp, very talented designer, who helped us create mood boards that we could go back to the consumer with. So I just wanted to flash up some of the output to give a bit of a flavour of where we came out. So we understood this user journey of our target consumer over the day. And you can see here a reflection almost as it flows of where overall positive feelings are in connecting with their children and story. And you see obviously that peaks at bedtime, because you've often got a bedtime story or some sort of connection. But the green points show the positives and the orange points show the pain points. So what we were looking to do is identify the opportunities, many at bedtime, plenty of other opportunities throughout the day, where we can look at ways that Book Trust aren't currently engaging and exploiting some of those positive points, but particularly importantly, seeing how we can relieve some of the pain points for this audience. We also had this product model where we said any new offering must do the following things. So yeah, we won't go through that in detail in the interest of time, but it's all in the slides. And then destination a map. So this enabled us to look at 4 different areas, and there was some, if you go throughout the day, there's a sort of skew between moments at the bottom of the map where people are looking for more sense of adventure. At the top of the map, it's more of a comfort, it's a wind down, and more closely connected to those nighttime moments. And then there are some people that are in that mindset of empower me on the left, do it myself. I feel I can read stories with my children, or I can interact with them. Others that say, look, there's a lot going on, I'm very stressed, help me, give me some tools to do it for me. And then we had gold standards coming through of celebrities or people that they could identify with that would help bring these areas to life. So whether we were ideating around bag of tricks on the bottom right, give me some tools that just help me, whether it's something online I can connect to, or a physical toolbox of puppets or little games or little cards that I can play with, up to on the left, for example, at the top where you can really help me be in that blissful sort of sanctuary place when I'm perhaps reading with my children. And the output was, we had 17 different ideas, which in the co-creation, when we went back to these families and we shared them all with them and we talked to them how they would work, we ended up with 10 really, really strong ideas that some of them played all the way. You can see idea 3 played all the way across the whole map. And what this did was enable Book Trust to get out of bedtime. So just wanted to reflect on sort of big takeaways that struck us, or things that were perhaps a little bit surprised, and really enable Book Trust to take some of these learnings forward. So firstly, disadvantaged families, reading with children is about spending quality time together. It's not about creating the best reader. You parents just want to encourage their children, they want to bond with their children, and they want to feel that their children are sort of ready for real life, ready to go on and tackle school. And that isn't always about being the best reader. You also want to give the parents confidence as well, so they can enjoy that time together. Interesting, the second finding was, we expected, these people are very connected to technology, they're connected to their phones, they're connected to devices, but actually some of the strongest ideas came from nostalgia. People talked about them as old school. They had a physical, tangible access, something they could feel and touch and interact with their children with. No right or wrong way to read to a child. So the semiotic analysis unearthed that we looked at lots of different campaigns and lots of different brands that were trying to connect with children or connect to others, and we found that This Girl Can, that was a sort of real masterclass of Procter & Gamble campaign of being compassionate, judgment-free communication, understanding everyday barriers that people are facing, rather than sort of patronizing or doing a put on a Book Trust, we know how to read and we're going to educate you. Opportunities exist beyond bedtime. We've seen that already in that user journey map. And then parent pressures and children's emotional needs led to opportunities. So we found often parents, they wanted to be active, they desperately wanted to be able to read with their children at bedtime, but they've got chaotic lives, they're often doing late shifts, there's a lot going on, there are other children that are causing distraction, and so there needed to be ways that people could you could help them, and that was more do it for me, and give them little tools that could ease their pressure, and that led to some really powerful opportunities that people loved. So I think that's it. I will stop sharing.
Great, thank you, Sally. That was really fascinating. I think all five of the papers, I think, were brilliant examples of indies doing kind of great work, and hopefully everyone listening kind of got a good flavour of that. So I think now we've got about 10 minutes or so for some questions. I don't think we have anything in the chat. Does anyone want to turn their video, their camera on and unmute and ask a question? I've got a question if no one else has one, but
I should go ahead, Matt.
yeah, I was just interested because I think all five of the papers were kind of multi-stage and mixed methodology to some extent, and I was just kind of interested from each of you really, if you went back to the beginning of the project, to the original proposal that was first written, to what extent did what you ended up doing, what did you write the proposal and that's how it happened, or did it evolve and change kind of over time? Were you kind of basically dependent on having very kind of open-minded kind of clients that were prepared to change? So I'm just interested in that.
Yeah, a point I springs to mind is we pretty much always do with clients at the beginning that asset mining phase. And we don't lock on, we give a guidance as to what we think the methodology might work, might be to address their needs. But we say to them, just do that first little bit, because so often people are sitting on gems and they're sitting on so many research summaries, and you can unlock and unearth things from there and say, well, look, actually, you don't really need to do your future forecasting. You've got tons of trend reports. We can extract that. Or you're really missing, you've got a big unknown here and you need to do some more qual research in this area that perhaps you're not quite as solid in as you could be. So we often, I mean, in this case, I think it followed the track we expected it to, but we certainly didn't lock anything until we'd done that initial bit. But in many other client projects, we do change the methodology from what we've originally recommended.
What about others?
I suppose I alluded to it already, but the nature of going for proposals, particularly when they're funded, is they've already prescribed what they want to do. So that was always our first thing, is having that conversation with them once you've got that foot in the door to try and work what's through. I guess as well with ours, because it was a project evaluation, almost every project they sat on data and they want to understand the impact of it, so it naturally fits into there. But that's why Sally talks about the asset mining at the start. We do like a discovery session almost, but it's effectively just a meeting. Once you understand where they're at, what some of their pain points have been, what their learnings are, and have those conversations, you then can work out the most efficient use of your time and your skills, because quite often they didn't know that they were sat on all that data that was useful. They saw that as an annoyance because they were having to send the funder all this data. They didn't see that as like potential analysis and stories from there. So that was it for us, is almost get your foot in the door and then have the conversation and work from there.
Yeah.
My one pretty much stayed as I thought. The thing where the big flex came with mine was where and when we could actually do the fieldwork, because I was, as you can imagine, very reliant on the clients and their other charity connections, goodwill, in terms of letting me into venues to do this research with these audiences. It's not something that I could have just recruited myself. So where and when I was actually doing the field work was very much in the lap of the gods and really flexed. Even on the day, it'd be like, oh, you're doing 4 sessions with friendship pairs, and it turned out I was doing 5. One had 4 people in, one had 1 person. It was a constant sort of moving flex of fieldwork. But other than that, I always knew it was going to be qual and then quant, and that I suppose the quant survey would need some easy read around the technology to help people do the survey, and I got a better sense of how that would work once I'd done the qual. But it was a fairly straightforward. It didn't really change very much apart from a few practical bits and bobs.
Mine too. Mine didn't change in the structure, but the content of each stage changed massively. So what we went on, the tools, the tasks, the bits we did within changed, but not the actual structure in this one. But it often does.
Yeah. Gareth?
I keep on muting myself and then putting myself back on. Ours didn't massively change. Again, I think at the flex for us was mostly around recruitment. I mean, in terms of trying to get this diversity of coaches, it was really tricky. So we had to kind of constantly think about new ways to try and find these people. And then obviously around conducting field work as well, there was lots of challenges around, obviously sort of safeguarding, but also, just timing when people were available. I think we were really lucky to have an ICG member as our client. So she sort of understood our potential challenges, but also was great at, providing that conduit with all those stakeholders as we were working for this collaborative as well. That obviously made it more difficult, but Barbara kind of really, felt like she was on our side and sort of, helped us to sort of think about the challenges as well. Annabelle, Nick, have you got anything else on that?
I think because, as Kath said, because we had 17, the partnership was made out of 17 different stakeholders. So actually, in terms of sort of what we were researching and then the outcomes, there was some quite difficult characters in there. So that stayed quite similar. But what as Kath just said, I mean, it was massively challenging. We were constantly thinking on our feet, constantly thinking in new ways, and they were very, very open to that and very responsive to how we were responding to the project and to those challenges. And so actually there was quite a lot of working with them. They were sort of thinking things through. We were thinking through things through. So we were all sort of collaboratively with them, kind of being nimble, and that really helped, that sort of flexibility there.
Yeah, great. It feels interesting that well, Adam and Emma's paper as well, with having that kind of, when you're working with the client has multiple stakeholders, then that's obviously kind of challenging, but perhaps getting through those challenges actually leads to kind of more interesting kind of work in the end.
It is when you need a good client, you know, that when you're working with, when you've got all those different stakeholders, because I'm sure we've all worked with clients who haven't been as protective or kind of stood up for you when you needed them to.
I think one other thing actually that I'd add on that, which I think really it got us through some pretty troubling times, was actually being collaborative and actually having each other to soundboard off each other and to support each other and to sort of say, actually that was invaluable, because I think for one, if I'd been trying to do that on my own, sitting in my little room, you know, my very fancy office, sorry, whatever, but it's, you know, it's it would have been really quite depressing, but having each other to bounce ideas off and to, you know, laugh through the bad times and stuff was really important.
Sorry if I just say one thing. I also think we should recognise it's probably one of the main reasons that clients come to independence. So if it was a very, very tight and prescriptive brief, if we want to do this product test and it's being run by a junior brand manager, probably the chances are they wouldn't come to the people like us on this call. Part of the reason we get these briefs is because they value somebody with that experience to navigate quite a diverse stakeholder landscape and turn what's quite a broad brief actually into something that feels achievable. And when I look through the 5 sessions we've heard today, I think that's a common strand in all of them, that actually the brief has been quite big and quite amorphous, but actually what the business challenge is quite clear, you know, whether it's about, you know, what should we do with Ollie, through to, you know, a kind of innovation project. I think but actually they need someone like us to try and translate that into a meaningful bit of research. So whilst it feels, you know, as Kath and Annabelle have just said, quite painful, I suppose we have to recognise that's part of our differentiation, if I call it that, in the market, is that's why they want to come to us.
Yeah, great. So any other questions from the floor, he says, from the virtual floor?
Just while you're looking at that, Luca's just posted, and I completely agree. It's that flexibility. And I think with some of those larger companies, they have products that they offer, but also you don't always get the contact with the individuals, the people that are on the ground, the people that are directly talking to the consumers that are directly, it's just that sort of personalized agility that I think they really like about independence.
Yeah, Sally?
Yeah, it was just an observation really for you, Matt, and to inquire about any other people who put their names forward for this this award. Do you tend to find that it's for socially positive, charity, third sector type research that people come forward about these things? Is it because commercial projects for more commercial type organizations are less likely to want to share what they've done in terms of research? I'm just wondering about the actual profile of the different presentations that we've seen, which have all been incredibly positive, constructive pieces of research and very socially positive.
Yeah, I would guess that is the case. I mean, it's the higher proportion of the entries are the kind of third sector type projects than I guess than reflects the industry, and I imagine that is because the kind of charities and other third sector organisations are more open to findings being shared, and so you can have a more kind of detailed kind of entries. So I suspect there is an element of that. I'm not sure. I think this is possibly this year more so in terms of the finalists than previous years, and I think it's not necessarily the case that you have to be in that working in that area to have a good entry or to have a chance of being a finalist. But I think this year there was just particularly rich examples of of things.
I think the reason that we went with this project was, I think, just because it was more creatively, you know, it was more creative in terms of the approach. And I think quite often jobs with the sort of public sector, you have to be more creative because budget's more limited, the audience is harder to reach, you know, what they want to find out is often kind of multifaceted. It's not just, you know, it's not always as straightforward as just sort of a single commercial objective. So I think, you know, those all might be reasons why as well.
I do think that's maybe a slight bias this year. I don't know, if I look at previous, you know, it's been whether it was Dan with Primark or Tom with kind of, you know, mini golf. There's been all sorts of things. So I think that's maybe a slight thing about this year, actually.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we're running out of time. So unless anybody's got a last minute question, we're probably going to have to wrap it up there. Anything else? No? Okay, well, thank you to all of the finalists. It's been a really interesting brief run through of your different projects. Congratulations to the ICG, because I'm just so impressed by the amount of collaboration that we've seen today. Thank you to all of you, and thank you to everybody for logging in to watching this webinar, and do join us again for one of our future webinars coming up in a couple of weeks' time. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Sally.